Hello, and welcome everyone. Welcome to Career Week. This event is dedicated to supporting tech professionals in their career development through insightful talks and practical sessions. During Career Week, learn to build lasting habits, equip yourself with in demand skills, and master techniques to communicate your value effectively. Showcase your unique strengths to attract opportunities that align with your professional goals. And don't miss the chance to elevate your career in technology and connect with the industry leaders. My name is Roman, and I am today your speaker. Today, we're going to have an awesome presentation about feedback culture. And a kind request, don't be shy to ask questions in the chat because during the entire presentation, it's a lot more fun when there are incoming questions and we can maybe expand on some of the things. And this presentation is designed in mind with the idea that you do ask those questions, especially at the end, since feedback is a very flexible thing. If you will have at the end maybe a question in terms of like your specific situation, it would be cool that you ask that specific question. So without further ado, let's start our lovely presentation about feedback culture. So a little bit about me. I'm a senior product manager at Globant. I am a startup consultant and tracker as well. And last but not least, a pitch trainer and public speaking mentor for the tech industry. I'm more very located in Moldova, but I have been doing projects all over Europe with this. So thank you so much for joining. And what are we going to be talking about is specifically knowledge and tools to help the team create a culture of feedback, because feedback is probably one of my favorite topics in terms of leadership, as it allows you to create an amazing team behind it. First of all, a little bit of Captain Obvious stuff, and trust me, I will be saying a lot of stuff that is apparently obvious, but when you put it into a structure, it becomes a tool. It becomes a tool that you can use consistently. So I'm not going to discover a new continent for you today, but I'll definitely give you a structure and a framework how to consistently give feedback. And we'll start from the very simple thing. What's the main difference between feedback and criticism? Well, criticism is the act of criticizing usually unfavorably and just highlighting faults without offering actual solutions. And that's the very thing you should always avoid, because nobody likes when they're criticizes. Because if you do it in a workplace, you're not going to get good answers or good results. What you would want is to always provide feedback in a professional context, is the transmission of evaluative or corrective information about an action, event, or process. Do mind, you can take this presentation with you after the presentation. I specifically leave in a valuable information that I think you're going to benefit from, because on the multiple occasions I did this presentation, usually employees took it to their company so they can easier present this presentation with the company without too much training. So feel free to grab this presentation afterwards. So I'm a product manager, and numbers is the thing for me. So why I want to convince you why you should care about feedback culture and how well it actually improves your teams and the industry itself. So in multiple researchers, like the Wakefield research, 72% of employees prefer immediate feedback instead of waiting for that annual review or even half-year review. Office Vibe study revealed that 65% of employees want more feedback, and 4 out of 10 workers are actively disengaged when they get little or no feedback. So yeah, you want it consistently, you want it more often. You don't want to leave it just once a year, because that's how you lose people. And according to Gallup, employees who receive regular feedback on their strengths become 8% more productive, and teams that focus on strengths every day have 12.5% greater productivity. So what I'm basically saying here, this is free, easy stuff that you can do today as a leader, as a team manager, as a director of your team. You don't need to do massive changes in the team. You have to be just more consistent with your feedback. Another one, research of CEB, now Gartner, found that nearly 96% of employees receiving feedback from their managers regularly is a good thing. And they would really want that to be more frequent. So I think you're seeing a theme that everybody wants feedback, everybody expects feedback, And this is not just a want of people, it's actually a need of the industry and productive teams. In terms of last metrics that to convince you that this is very important for teams is the frequent and meaningful feedback in the past weeks is critical to engaging employees during COVID-19. So we saw a lot of studies, especially during the work at home situation or work from home situation, that people really, really want it and they are engaged in the company if they get that feedback. And now let's get to the obvious part in terms of how do you actually give feedback. Yeah, it's kind of we feel just say something good or say something that has to be improved. Yeah, that is obvious, and it's very obvious as well that we have to keep our feedback focused on actions and not the person. So it is obvious. I know it is. That's why I have a very lovely badge on it. And I'm very notorious on saying obvious things so much that my wife actually gave me a business card, Captain Obvious. So yeah, I have a title and I'm going to use it because even though these things are obvious, somehow, strangely enough, very few people actually use these very obvious things. So if we're talking feedback models, there are three of them widely spread, widely used that you can use today without too many complications. They're all simple to apply. And of course, it takes training to use them. So let's start with the simplest one, maybe. It's the McKinsey model. You have a part A is the specific action or event or behavior you'd like someone to change. B, part B is the impact. And C is the suggestion, what they can do differently. If we would take it to an example, why did you do something? It made me feel this way, and in the future, I would recommend that you do the other thing. So it's very straightforward structure. The key thing about giving feedback, and I'm gonna jump a little bit forward, you really want to practice it first in writing and then verbally. So if you're planning to go into a meeting, all of the feedback that you want to give, so you want to train it like a muscle, like a reflex, you want to write it first on a piece of paper, or maybe paper is the best. Maybe type it out at least on the keyboard. And if you're not sure you're going to remember the specific structure or you're just learning to do it, what I would recommend, just take it in written form with you so that you can specifically present it to the person, or maybe even send it via email after you had a meeting with the person. So this is the McKinsey model, very straightforward, as most feedback forms are. The next one is the standard method. When your feedback is starting with a I like, I wish, or a suggestion phrased as a what if. And here I gave you some examples of what you can say. I like that you're so passionate presenting our product this morning. So you're specifically highlighting a very positive aspect of somebody doing something. What if you leave a little more time for questions during next presentation? These are very nice feedback moments that sounds a lot like suggestions. They're non-invasive and they're very easy to use, and they usually are perceived very friendly. If you ask me, I really like the Stanford method because they can be used in a plethora of situations, and it's always easy because it has a simpler structure because you just have started with a like, I wish, or what if, and then you just follow with the idea that you have. And there is the popular used in the agile methodology, because it's not just used for feedback, it's also obviously used for improvements. And the SKS method, stop, keep, and start doing, obviously is a representation of that. And it's obvious what they mean behind them. What should the person stop doing? What should the person keep doing? And what should the person start doing? Again, I'm not discovering a new continent here. I'm showing you here's how you should do it, and here's how I would recommend you start practicing it. And again, uh, it's easy when I say it from the presentation, but it's very hard to transform it into a reflex. Because any inherent trait when you're presenting something, you have to train it to the extent of this being a reflex, something that you automatically just say, that your brain thinks this way. So the first part is the hard part. You have to train it to be automatic. There's one more other feedback method that I actually dislike, and I want to specifically highlight it. Um, It's the sandwich feedback technique. Is when you give praise, then put a lot of criticism, and then give more praise just to hide it. A very blunt idea would a blunt representation of that. Hey, I really like your shoes. By the way, your presentation was garbage today. And hey, but that shirt really looked good on you during the presentation. Um, I'm of course making it dramatic for the simplicity of it, but the criticisms, the sandwich feedback is really not a technique that actually works because it tries to be good, but it's actually very bad because you're again creating a negative aspect to whatever like idea you want to share with the person. If we try to summarize, and this part is actually coming from me, it's not coming from anybody else, because I try to improve myself. I try to find whatever suits me as a leader or as a manager. So this is how I usually try to do it. State the specific event, action, or behavior, state the impact of that behavior, and start with the I like or I wish to encourage a person to change. And in this case, like when you come late to the meeting this morning, that's the A part. The whole team had to wait before we could start. That's the B, that's the bad part. I wish you could arrive earlier in the future so that the meeting can start on time. So that's a very, very nice way to say to a person, hey, you were very late. We don't want that to repeat again. Of course, everything requires context. We're assuming here that the person is a reasonable one. It's a person that we can communicate, can negotiate with efficiently, and everybody's human. So, of course, maybe you want to change a little bit your tone, but the structure still remains the same no matter what the person did. Because even if you change the tone to a more accusatory one, you still want to be clear what exactly did the person do wrong if it's a repeated offense. So I present to you the feedback models. Of course, again, you will take those slides with you and you can grab them and change them. So let's dive into a little bit of the characteristics of a specifically good feedback. First of all, it has to be always future focused. You can't change the past, so we have to focus on the future. It's evident, but hey, I told you I'm talking about evidence stuff today. So, and don't review the past work. Like because the person nobody can change the past, but you can change the future. So always try to do it future focused. When you're doing an analysis obviously of the past, hey, here are the parts that were missing in your presentation. In the future, I would like you to also include these aspects to your presentation. So obviously, again, it's a reflex. I always already try to make the feedback about the future just because I actively train this part. So never tell like what is bad on in the past. Try to focus specifically on the future. It has to be specific and clear. Your last workflow improved efficiency. Can you use it again this time? Of course, it would be even better if I just added some numbers. I see some questions in the chat. If the team could help me translate them into the English, I would love to respond to them. Yes. So you want to be specific. If you provide numbers, especially if you're giving good feedback, people really want to hear what exactly improved. You improved sales. You improved the viewership of our event. You increase the audiences of our event. If you add numbers, it's a lot always better perceived because it's even more specific, and it's even more clear how did you help somebody. When you're keeping it vague and general, well, nobody can actually assess and understand the value of the presentation. So whatever you did last time seemed to work, do that next time. Again, in this case, what we're doing wrong would be the fact that we're telling a person, we didn't really understand what you did. We still appreciate that, but can you do it again, please? Because we really liked it. So, but then you remove the acknowledgement of the person that actually did something positive. So yeah, that's why you want to avoid it. In terms of actionable and applicable, like since we're working within the tight budget, let's be detail oriented, and so we're not compromising the quality. So you can't ask unreasonable things. That's what we're going with this, because if it's impractical and irrelevant, if we had a bigger budget, we could really refine the quality of this and make it 10 times better. Yeah, if we had always more time, more budget, more people. We could do all the things better, but that's not applicable in real life. We can only work with what we have. So never try to create feedback that's vague in terms of expectations. I would really love this to be better. Well, what does that mean? That means better how and how much and by when. So always has to be actionable, also always has to be clear. Evelyn is asking, what is your opinion to provide feedback to your superior about her leadership style? A very good question. I actually have a section about leadership, so I will come back to this question when we get to about asking feedback from leadership. If it's about providing, okay, I think it will be cooler to discuss it in the context of specifically superiors and stakeholders. So I'll get back to your question, Evelyn. Thank you so much. Ideas or thought starters. So in example, the contrast of the colors might reduce the readability of the text. So you really want to be again specific. You can't just say the color palette is not really my taste and I prefer a serif font. You can't. First of all, we remember that in this case specifically, as an example that I'm giving, um, you can't give your feedback because you're feeling like that. We're building a product for somebody. So you have to, if you have an idea that could improve, for example, in this case, a design, you really want to be specific why. And it can't be related to your personal opinion on the fact. It has to be something that relates to the scope of the project. Intended to improve. Before you finalize, I have a few suggestions. Instead, and don't say, to be clear, I'm disappointed in the result. So you can immediately feel just by the phrasing, I don't even need to use a different tone. I can just immediately understand which one would work better with people. So if you're always looking to improve the life of people around you and you want them to perform better, um, you should always be nice about it in terms of presenting it, and saying that you're disappointed is always a very hard thing to take for a lot of people. Hi, I'm watching from Colombia. If a company does not have a culture of feedback, how would you introduce this topic to your team, both for superiors and collaborators? Very good question. Um, the simple answer, it should start from you. If you're an employee, no matter which position you are, people really appreciate feedback, even if the company doesn't have a feedback culture. So ideally, you would want to start by you doing yourself, because if you're the one asking for it, you have to be the one starting to do it in the first place. If you are in a leadership position, you really want to find a way to start creating feedback loops within the team, uh, starting with the yearly review, because that's the simplest place, because at least once a year a person has to have a feedback from their superiors for whatever reason, so they can know where they can grow. But all in all, the simplest solution, you have to start doing feedback yourself and asking that feedback from your colleagues and asking that feedback from your superiors. That's the best way to start doing it. If you can give me more context, we can discuss it at the end, and I would gladly give you uh, more ideas. There's another question from Daniela. How can you answer to feedback? Is there a way to show I'm listening and I'll be working proactively to improve and understand the feedback? That's a good question, but I need to think about it, to be honest. Well, it comes down basically to proactive listening at the end of the day. And what's even better in terms of like showing that you actually are interested in the feedback, you might want to add follow-up questions. Okay, you said that I improved this part of the presentation. Can you exactly tell me why do you think it's the case? Like, did you notice something? Did more people react? Did somebody tell you that they enjoyed it? Was there a feedback form that I didn't see? So follow-up questions and proactive listening would be the kind of to-go solution for answering to feedback. Um, Also, a very good thing to feedback is asking it in written form. Why? Because then you can break down it and see, like, first of all, it's appreciative. I can tell you for a fact that reading feedback from what you did, for example, even 1 year ago, is always cool, and it's always positive, if it's a positive feedback. If it's an improvement feedback, again, it's good to have it in written form or request it in written form so that you can come back to it and see like what is exactly needed. Do I think that I improved on that? So that would be my take. Thank you for the lovely questions. I really enjoying them. Now we're getting into the part that very few actually, for some reason, books or resources kind of give you. Like giving feedback is to an extent an art form, and this art actually requires a process and it requires a setup. You have to pick the correct circumstances to give feedback, which is actually something a lot of people overlook. I have another presentation is called communication bottlenecks, and from that presentation I just want to grab one sentence, and that's: you always have to understand the human context. Like, is that person tired? Is that person busy? Is that person having a personal problem? You have to always look at the context, and this section is specifically about that. That's understanding and providing the best space, time, and context for giving feedback. First of all, you have to take into account the personality of the person that you are trying to give feedback. We're all humans, we're all different, and we also perceive information very differently. Some people are very good visual people, some people are all just audio people, some people just actually want the numbers in front of them. So you have to understand the people you're working with and people you're providing feedback to, what is exactly their personality and how they consume information as well. So in this regard, you also have to take into consideration what type of person you're giving feedback to, especially if it's an improvement feedback. How they're going to take it? Do you need specific like a specific setup? Do you want them to, I don't know, to feel calm, or they're a very direct person and you can just straight tell to them what they need to improve? You can't give to two different people the same feedback in the same way. So you have to be careful with the personality you're dealing with. Never public, always private is a general good rule. There's a difference between feedback and praise. Like if you're giving praise at the end of the sprint, or you're giving praise at the end of the project, that like, team, you were amazing, especially Daniel because he did that part of the project, or for Elena because she managed to negotiate a wonderful price. That is praise, in my opinion. It's a form of feedback, but it's a very one-sided form of feedback because uh, they can't action on it. If you're in a room of 50 people and you're praising people, giving them positive feedback, they can't on the spot discuss that. Maybe they would want to discuss this, but if we're talking about improvement feedback, that can never ever be public. That's always private because, again, people are different and they might react different ways. So you don't want to shun or make a person feel uncomfortable because you're discussing their feedback in a public setting. So the safest and always best solution for feedback is always doing it in private. Very fun one, because actually we are also busy, so we forget to actually ask, like, does the person actually have time to have a conversation with you? Because again, no matter the type of feedback, they would want time to properly process it. So like, if you are just trying to catch them, hey, do you have 5 minutes, and you want to give them the feedback? No, that's not appropriate, because you won't give them the opportunity to actually respond, properly consume the feedback, or just even enjoy it if it's a positive one. So make sure that they have time, like 15 minutes, 30 minutes, whatever the case may be. Again, context dependent, what type of feedback we're talking about. Is it a short one, long one? But at least 15 minutes should be a decent time window. But you have to be sure they're not in a rush to grab their child, or they're not in a rush to go anywhere. If it comes to feedback, what I have observed most of the time, it's better at the end of the week, especially for positive one, so that they can enjoy the process of it. If it's a slightly more on the negative side, I would actually think of providing it in the Monday, so that they can process that feedback and maybe come back to you and ask you more about it. But if we're talking about feedback, even the slightly like improvement one, let's say it, I usually find it's better to present on Thursdays and Fridays. Why? Because that's when people have the most free time and they have enough time to actually sit down with you and listen to you. A very nice way is to grab a lunch or coffee with your colleague that you want to provide feedback. Depending on your relationship, like if you're at the same level or they're superior, you want to be in this more like simple setting where you're both relaxed, when you are both concentrated on the conversation. So a lunch or a coffee is usually a very nice way to actually do it. And at least that's in my experience, because different cultures might have a different opinion. For some cultures, lunch is sacred and you never discuss work at lunch. In some other cultures, it's totally okay to have a work lunch date. I think that's what it's called. So you can have a discussion about a certain topic. And last but not least, pick the right mood. You really have to be a little bit of a, how you say, face reader, or just mood reader for people. Because if you want to give feedback to a person that haven't drank their coffee and they're grumpy and they're not welcoming, and it's completely fine to be like that until you had your coffee, they're not going to be that interested in having a conversation with you. If you have a person that is currently under stress because they have to, I don't know, uh, finish a project and they're on a tight deadline, it's definitely not the right time to give that feedback, even if it's very important, unless of course it's related to the project they're working on. But all in all, you really want to pick a time to give feedback to a person when they are feeling at least somewhat comfortable, because you want it to be received correctly. Because right now, if a person is experiencing stress in their personal life, whatever the case may be, and you are adding on top the improvement feedback, even if it's presented nicely, it can be perceived bad, as if they did something bad. And there's a lot of people that feel uncomfortable when they feel that they did something wrong. It's also on them to work on that, but us as leaders, we have to take the conscious decisions to understand what is the right time to do it. In terms of body language, just for context, I also, beside all of my wonderful other activities that I did, I also have a theatrics background. I did 7 years of theater. So for me, body language is probably one of the most important things when communicating with people. And the first and the simplest one is, don't raise your voice when you're giving feedback. You want to have a calm demeanor, you want to have a nice tone, you want the person to enjoy the conversation. For that, you have to have a nice tone and not raise your voice. Uh, it's evident, but you would be surprised how many managers think that people are going to perceive better when you're screaming at them or even just talking louder. And by the way, note for some of you, because I am also like that, I'm a loud speaker. Like, I generally, my volume of speaking is usually loud because I'm used to talking a lot in public. Because of that, I naturally have a higher volume of my voice, and I have to actually check, did I talk loudly, because some people perceive it as a bad thing. Yes, actually, the next slides after this, I think, are the stakeholder ones. So we're going to talk about that one. The next thing is, don't cross your arms during the presentation of feedback. There is a little bit of like interesting, how you say, psychology behind this. So uh, a long time, it was believed that crossing your arms is kind of this negative thing, that you are upset or you're not happy. Uh, it can be true, but it also can be true that you are actually performing what is called a self hug, because this is actually a very comforting position. Even though this is a comforting position, and some people do it just to feel more secure when they're having a conversation or when they're on stage, when you're giving feedback, you actually have to a little bit strive to avoid doing it, because a lot of people believe that like crossing your arms is a bad, a bad demeanor, even if you're not doing it out of, how you say, a bad demeanor, but because you just want a self hug, just to feel comfortable. You still have to not do it, because again, unfortunately, it's perceived wrong. So yeah, be careful with that. And last but not least, don't frown. So this is an interesting one. It's so evident, but I actually want to explain the science behind it, because it's not just a don't frown. It's a lot better when you just generally talk nice to people and you talk with a smile on your face, because then you're perceived very well. And it actually comes from our reptilian brain, the part of the brain that is responsible for survival. Our brain separates people into four distinct categories when it comes to perceiving humans. First one is neutral category, is when we just walk down the street and we see people on the street and we consider them neutral because they don't represent any interest of us. So they're in the neutral category. The second group is a friend, group friend. All or otherwise said, a person that I trust. In this sense, what is happening, we want to actually get into this group. And for that, the easiest and fastest way is to smile, actually, because that is a universal sign how you can like create positive correlation with another person. That's why when you're a speaker on stage, when you're communicating with people, no matter if you had your coffee in the morning, you slept or you didn't sleep enough, you have to smile, because then the brain of the person you're talking to will perceive you as a person that I trust. Because if you don't do that, you end up in the third group. The third group is people that you do not trust. And there's a difference between conscious and unconscious trusting. So the simple example is when you go to the airport, you have airport security, people dressed sometimes in police uniform, sometimes dressed in military uniform. They usually have sunglasses or they don't, but the main thing is they have a gun. They have a gun in their hands, and our brain that is responsible for survival looks at that person. Consciously, we understand that there's a person that is there to protect us, uh, but our lizard brain is just actually just saying, let's get out of here. So even if consciously we understand that this person is there to protect us, we still want to get out of there. So here's why you want to end up still in the second group, in the group of people you trust. Fourth group is person that I am considering as a sexual partner, or like a future wife, future husband. So you don't want to end up in this group as well. That you can do that by dressing up provocatively or unprofessionally, or flirting in an appropriate moment. The context doesn't matter. We don't want to end up in that group as well, because so you don't want to frown. You want to always smile when you're having a conversation, especially if it's feedback, because then the person will relax a bit and perceive the feedback a lot better. And as I was saying, getting feedback from stakeholders, also giving to them, is also something we can discuss. So first of all, stakeholders, the problem with stakeholders, they don't have time. And it's not because they're bad, but just because usually they're everybody's trying to grab them. So the first thing when asking for feedback from your stakeholders, first it has to be feedback for a specific item or action. You can't ask them a very general question like, hey, I wanted to hear if you are happy with my performance. That is a very vague question that requires a lot of brain capacity to actually give something tangible. What I would recommend asking instead is, hey, I was working on this project for the last 3 months that you are aware about and have been monitoring the progress for. We are done with it. And I would want to ask you if you could give me feedback on the final result or on the process of integrating this project. So in this case, we narrowed down specifically the feedback for a specific action item that took place, and they can concentrate on actually giving you something tangible for that. So always ask for specificity. Don't ask for vagueness or for big like spans. Even if you're asking a person, hey, I want to get feedback on my performance for the last month. Um, Again, very vague. But if you want to like ask a general performance questions, even with that, you can ask, hey, I was curious to hear from you for the last month, I've been working very hard. I managed to do these action items on our backlog. And I was curious, are you happy with the delivery of these tasks? Are you happy with the efficiency, the budget? Is it good? Or you feel that there are places that we can improve, or you're overall happy? So give them something to latch on when you're asking them for feedback. Figuring out the preferred communication tool. This is something valid for both actually parties, when you're giving feedback and when you're asking for it. So in this context, some leaders, unfortunately, are very busy. So maybe it's a lot better if you write them an email or you drop them a message in Slack, or you actually send them a feedback form so that it's easier for them to, I don't know, assess you on a scale, your performance, or something like that. So you have to, this is not something I can tell you here's the best way to do it. It's for you to figure out what's the best communication tool for the given person, because some people prefer it on the phone, some prefer it video wise, some people prefer it live. You have to figure out what works best for your stakeholder, and like how, what is their preferred, because usually when they are very busy, they don't have the opportunity to have an entire meeting, but maybe they have 5 minutes to fill in a feedback form. The feedback form is actually one of my favorite ones for big meetings, especially when you're having a demo. So let's say you're having a demo for that 10 different departments participate in, and obviously they're not going to give you each feedback how was the demo, because that would be too much, and you can't set up a meeting for that. But you can send in the chat of the meeting, hey, after finishing the meeting, can you please give us a little bit of feedback? How did you feel about the demo? So figuring out the context is always gives you a better way to grab that feedback and not expect it always just in verbal form. Setting up a review session is also very convenient, because again, for a feedback session or a review session, you need to prepare. So you want to maybe schedule it usually at least 1 month in advance. Of course, depending on culture or depending on the size of the company and how busy your stakeholders are, you always want to adapt based on the situation. But you definitely want to set up at least 1 week in advance so that the person actually has time to prepare and have a productive meeting. And if you can help them, um, you can do the next thing. And I already talked about provide a feedback form. So you can actually pre-write for the review session. You can give them a feedback form. Hey, here are the topics I want to discuss. If you can provide me preliminary feedback, so maybe you want to have a more like investigative review session with me, you can write which topics you would want us to discuss. There's a note that I missed. I ask for feedback on my work and leadership, but it's often vague or just everything's fine. Well, this is where we're coming back to the ask feedback for specific action item. Because if you ask a general question, you will get a very general answer. So if you want like feedback, it's usually, hey, can you tell me how do you feel about my performance on this project since I have been working on it? uh, like for the last 2 months. Are you happy with the delivery? Are you happy with something? So yeah, if you, the vaguer your question is in terms of feedback, the vaguer the answer usually will be from the people. Because again, if it's too vague, they need to actually concentrate too much. And we unfortunately live in an era of decision fatigue. Um, this is a very common problem for a lot of people that work in the industry. Decision fatigue is just by the end of the day, you don't want to make any decisions, and you just don't want to even think. Uh, like my mom still has a problem understanding when she's inviting me for dinner and she's asking me, "Hey, what do you want for dinner?" I said, "Whatever's going to be on the table, I'll eat that." And but I want to make something that she'll actually eat and like a lot. I can't, mom, because my decision fatigue is over the roof, so it's hard. So, yeah. Uh, General questions don't work today because people are too tired to think because they're working too much. Uh, Same as with the previous slides, lunch or coffee date works wonderfully. Again, depends on the culture. If this is acceptable in your culture, Coffee date usually works in most cultures. Lunch date, some people just like to relax, especially if they're stakeholders and there is a no discussing work rule in the company. So coffee date is usually the one that's perfect because you can both relax over a cup of coffee and actually have a conversation and discuss feedback. Lunch date, please check your local customs for that. And last but not least, again, it's evident, but pick the right mood because with stakeholders, I know it's usually hard to pick the right mood because they're always busy, they're always tired, they're always stressed. For this, usually again, Thursdays and Fridays are the best days to actually catch a stakeholder for that because Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday are the days when they're the busiest. So in this case, try to catch them on Thursdays and Fridays because this is usually the day where everybody's kind of finished with most of their stuff and they actually are open to have a conversation. And last but not least, I have for you some reading materials for you to take with you. I'll ask my colleagues to give me a hint. What is the best way to share these slides with the audience? I think as a newsletter would be best for all of the participants who are participated in it. But there is an aspect that I can actually make a separate presentation and altogether, and I'm considering to make it for the future, is culture differences for feedback. This is a very important aspect for international teams because very different cultures have very different traditions and have different aspects. How do you give them feedback? Um, for example, if you ever worked with the Dutch people, um, you already know of a very simple fact. Dutch people are brutally honest. I had the opportunity to work with wonderful Dutch people, and they were wonderful, but they could tell me, Roma, that sweater doesn't look nice on you. It looks fat. You look fat in it. And it was said with no evil smile or no evilness behind it. They just said it because Dutch people are brutally honest, and that's their characteristic. Um, so yeah, um, in terms of culture differences, there is every country is very different. I come from Moldova, so both people from Moldova and Romania actually prefer direct feedback, not as direct as the Dutch, but pretty direct. But it has to be always, again, private. So because that's we like, I don't know, we're kind of two countries. We like efficiency, so we prefer direct feedback. We don't like sugarcoating too much, so we actually prefer just to tell it straight to our face what somebody feels about. Uh, so yeah, it's a very big subject. So I want to in the future make a presentation about this because so many different cultures, so many different ways that people communicate, and they have specific customs to the culture of giving feedback. So I left you free articles for you to read. My colleagues will share with you the link to this presentation, so you can actually read about more. And you always have to consider the nationalities of teammates you have, because if you don't do that, you're risking to make a bad decision or presenting something in a bad way. So yeah, please take that into account. And that was the last slide. And actually, right now, I'm more interested in your questions. If you have a specific situation that you encountered while working, or even right now you were having a challenge or something, I would love to read the chat and see if we can have a conversation around it and see if there's something I can actually help you with, or maybe just present an opinion. I think there was one question I said I'm gonna read later. So, uh, if a company does not have a culture of feedback, how would you introduce this topic? Okay, that I responded. Mhm. Oh, there was a good question. Evelyn is saying, what is your opinion to provide feedback to your superior about his, her leadership style? Um, A lot depends what kind of leader do you have. First of all, you kind of want to do some research a bit. Is that person actually, how you say, willing to receive feedback? Do they want that feedback? Are they're a person oriented on growth, or are they a person that is most likely take the criticism very harsh to their heart and not appreciate it? So this is maybe the first thing you have to understand: is this a person that actually will appreciate like feedback? If we're talking about improvement feedback, positive feedback about appreciating somebody's leadership style or their work, everybody loves that, so it's no harm in that. But if we're talking about improvement one, you have to first figure out, is that person willing to hear it out in the first place? And that's something I can't give you an instructional manual for it, but I think you can use your intuition and context of the company to understand that. Best leaders, in my experience, always want feedback. And when you present it, you have to be very on point and specific. You cannot be, how you say, general with your feedback. If you think your leader is neglecting or not providing enough attention to your team for whatever reason, you have to validate that specific feedback, like in terms of you have to, how would I properly say it? um, you have to nail in the coffin, like specifically, hey, our team is lacking guidance because we stopped doing the regular bi-weekly meetings in terms of synchronizing with you, and we really would appreciate if we could start them over again, because we don't want to bother you so much on a regular daily basis, and just having a sync once a week or once every 2 weeks would actually help us avoid like disturbing your work schedule. So it has to be super on point in terms of like if you're providing an improvement feedback. I hope I answered your question. And if there are any other questions, oh, I see something appeared. Oh, yeah, yeah. Juan actually asked the same question: how to give feedback to your boss, manage upwards. Again, the first, if it's positive, everybody loves positive. But if it's improvement, you have to figure out, is that person actually open to that, and it has to be specific. For the cultural part, I would also recommend the book The Culture Map by Erin Mayer. Oh yeah, that's a very awesome book. Thank you, Konstantin. Yeah, that's a very awesome book in terms of cultural differences. So yeah, do read that book. That's a very good recommendation. I have a colleague who keeps bragging that he is a lead and needs to work overtime or be available after work hours. And sometimes he says so that we might consider do the same. How to tell him no? Oh, that's a that's a good question. Um, well, um, a lot depends, again, culture. This is actually a very cultural thing, because if you're working in the US, you staying overtime is almost expected. If you're working in Germany, uh, like people will look strange on you when you tell them you want to work overtime. So first, I would consider the cultural context. From which country is that person? Or because they can be, for example, they can be Romanian, but they grew up their entire childhood in America, or they grew in their entire childhood, I don't know, uh, let's say in Germany. So like you want to understand like what is the nationality, original nationality of that person, and from there you should figure out how to say no, because that bragging honestly is not, how you say, is not an invitation. If they directly ask you, we both are from Romania, the firm is big on no for overtime. Well, like, you just say goodbye to him. The best, in my opinion, that's the best way to react, is just not to react to that person's invitation to do overtime. If that person is doing overtime, that's kind of on them, and they are actively choosing to do the overtime. So you just not react to their to their statements. That's the simplest one I would recommend in this case. Mm, any other questions? Oh, by the way, colleagues did share the articles in the chat. links, so I do recommend copy pasting those links because they're going to unfortunately disappear after that. So, do we have any other questions, dear colleagues? It's a very cool topic. I usually reserve 15 to 20 minutes. Doing this live is even, like in person is usually even better. But if you have any questions, I would be glad to answer to them. Maybe we wait 1 or 2 more minutes. I'll check if there's anything I missed from your questions previously. Oh, cool. Juliana is asking, always we talk about how to give a feedback, but how is the better respond when we receive a feedback or a bad feedback? I'll assume when you say bad feedback, you mean a feedback that was about improvement, not it was given bad. Well, I actually can tackle both cases. Well, when you're receiving an improvement feedback, you want to make sure first of all that it's in written form. If you're in a meeting, you can ask the person, "Hey, do you have this in written form? Because I would really want to improve it. If not, do you mind if I take some notes while we talk? Because I want to understand better what is uh, what is the improvement point I have to work on, and I want to make it very tangible. So if you don't mind, I'll make some notes while we're talking, and maybe I can specify it." uh, if the feedback is inherently just the person gave feedback not efficiently, that's where you are starting to ask for specifics. And you have to be nice about it usually, because every conversation has to be nice, but you want to start it with I appreciate the feedback you're giving, and I would also, and here's a trick. Here's a trick for everybody. Stop using the word but. But is a very bad word in most conversations. Replace it usually with the word and. So, thank you for the feedback you have given, and I would love to actually dive in more into it. Can you please be more specific in this part, or point number 2 or point number 3, because I'm having a hard time actually understanding fully what you're trying to say to me, or I don't understand what I should start improving exactly with your feedback. So you want to start adding follow-up questions on the feedback and making sure, did you understand correctly them? And another way to kind of correct bad feedback when a feedback was formulated not efficiently was reiterating what they said. So if I just want to make sure I understood you correctly. Did you just say that you meant this and this and this, and that I should improve this and this and this, or you meant something else? So you want to reiterate whatever they said and make sure that you understood it correctly, but you have to say it in your own words. You don't repeat what they said. You reiterate it with your own words. Hope that idea will help you in the future. How to start something new on a small medium team. Uh, can you be specific with the question, like a new project or start in feedback culture? I'm curious, what do you mean by that, Dan? So if you can add a little bit more context to the question, I would love to answer it. So as a PM, sometimes I have to pass on the feedback I've received as criticism from the stakeholder. How would you recommend starting the conversation, highlighting their strengths? Well, it's sad that the stakeholder is providing criticism. I would do the same thing as I just said to Juliana. First of all, with the stakeholder, I would try to filter out the criticism out of the feedback of the stakeholder and reiterate what they told me, and just say them, hey, thank you for the feedback, even though it's criticism. I wanted to put it into a more I wanted to refine what you're proposing to us, and you want to try to reiterate everything they said in written form, only in written form, um, so that I can pass on these improvements points. And you have to actually include yourself, what you feel that should be improved to bring better results. Because if your leader is not efficient in terms of feedback, unfortunately, you have to help them for their good, for your good, and for the good of your employee. So yeah, you have to refine, revisit, reiterate their feedback, get specific improvements points, and then pass on the improved improved criticism to your colleagues. That is the best way. Never transfer negative criticism just the way it was delivered, because it's not productive and it's not going to bring any growth to you or to your colleague. So thank you, Alejandro. Thank you, Dan. There's a follow. For example, I wanted to start some automation project, small thing. I even told them I can work outside of work, but they do not even want to try. How to approach the team to try and do something? It might make us work faster and easier. Well, I would start with trying to at least put a number on the efficiency part. So when we're saying we're going to be better, we're going to be better how and by how much. That's the first thing I usually would try to specify when we're talking about improvements. You might encounter that they just don't care. That's unfortunately a very common problem within our region, I would say. People just don't care, even when you're presenting something for free for them. Uh, I would try to specify that it doesn't require extra resources, like to make a highlight out of it. I would really not recommend working overtime. If you can estimate how much effort it's going to take, I think it might provide better value in terms of starting the automation project. And ultimately, this is less feedback. This is more an initiative you want to start. And in this case, what I would highly recommend you, first of all, build your case, like with numbers. Hey, I want to do this. It's going to make us be more efficient by this. It's going to save us X amount of time per week, or it's going to save X amount of time for the team. You have to have a measurable element to it. And then you have to find the decision maker in your team. So you find the person that makes kind of the final decision and is interested in the improvement. And you present them your case of what you would want to change and how. Because maybe your team doesn't want it, but in my experience, an experienced leader always wants things to work better. There is the context that you should be careful in terms of, like, so people might not like the fact that you went to a manager and presented this. So I don't know, Don, you can write me on LinkedIn. I would actually be curious to hear you out, because it's a very nuanced thing, and there are so many like divergent ways you can go in terms of doing it. But end of the day would be find the person that makes the decision and present them a case with numbers. Because at the end of the day, any business is trying to be more efficient, and maybe your colleagues don't care about it, but any like sane manager would want to be more efficient. Thank you for the cool questions. I really love this session specifically because we always have a conversation around it. So, any last questions before we end our lovely presentation? We have 1 or 2 more minutes left. Last question from Luis. Hi, Roman. It was an interesting talk. How would you ask for a detailed feedback beyond a good bad flag to a team that's not very talkative in a simple way? I had such a case in a project with people that didn't really want to talk. I won't tell which project, but I can tell you most of the team was from Germany. And Germans are, from what I encountered, they're not really like, they don't usually give you direct feedback, unfortunately. So one way we found a way to interview the team by doing a Google form, or like a feedback form with closed-ended questions. We basically asked them, hey, how do you feel in the team, 1 to 5? How efficient do you think you are? We are as a team, 1 to 5, and so on. So basically, we made it very easy for them to talk with us through a feedback form with close-ended questions. And at the end, we actually left one open-ended section where um, anybody could write their opinion. Like, here's an open forum. Do you have any things that you think we could improve as a team? So yeah, strangely enough, we used the concept of bureaucracy that Germany has so much for our benefit, and we asked for a feedback form from the people. Hope this will help you, Lise. And do you have any recommended book about feedback? Actually, unfortunately, no. I mainly am taking it from the articles and the studies and from the feedback models, because I was curious how to better, more efficiently give feedback. That's how I found the McKinsey models. I think I found them, I don't know, 7, 8 years ago. It was because I'm also a teacher. I have a studies in as a teacher in IT, and I always was curious how to better give feedback to my students. And yeah, one other technique that I specifically practice with students, since I mentioned them, I appropriated from my swimming teacher a long time ago. It was like 20 years ago. He was my teacher. He never told me I did something wrong. He always told me, "Hey, you're doing everything correctly, but just to be a little bit more efficient when you're swimming, try to add a more angle to your arm so it goes more smoother into the water." I think that was the best way to give feedback to a person that's learning a new skill. So they're never doing anything wrong, they're doing right. And also, if you want to be more efficient, and everybody wants to be, you should do also this little thing. And you add a lot of these small little things, and then they eventually just become better and better. So, Juan, I don't have a book for you. There are wonderful books generally on communication. But in terms of feedback, it's all about practice, in my experience. So yeah, I will. You actually sparked my curiosity. I should find some good books on this and read more. Any other questions? We got carried away a little bit. It's actually all free right now. So thank you for participating. I really loved to present. It would be even cooler if we could do it live. If you're in Moldova, do come to our Globant office. And before closing, I want to give a cool message from our colleagues and remind everyone that we're offering free exclusive 30-minute mentoring sessions with our experts to gain personalized career advice and tailored to your goals. Please register now. My colleagues are going to add it to the chat to secure your spot, and winners will be announced on Thursday this week. So don't miss your mark. Please register on the link if you want a mentoring session. I want to thank you. And again, reminder, feedback is cool. It's evident, it's obvious, but you have to practice it to actually start being good at it. So keep practicing and start doing it on a regular basis, because from what I noticed, feedback starts from you. You might want it. So if you want it, you have to start giving it and asking for it. So I wish you the best of luck, and I wish you a lovely evening. Goodbye.